The photographs arrived on a Tuesday in early August. They weren't the kind that required filters or careful editing. Just a woman with 3 children standing in front of a house. The woman wore simple clothes. No makeup artist waited in the wings. The children squinted in the Caribbean sun. Behind them, a painted sign read simply, Rihanna. What made the images unusual wasn't their quality but their rarity. Rihanna has spent most of her adult life performing for cameras, but this looked different. The Instagram post that accompanied the photos arrived with a caption that revealed something closer to reflection than promotion. One minute I feel like that kid from Westbury. The next minute, I'm bringing my own kids back to Rihanna Drive Trippy, how life works. The street itself had been renamed 6 years earlier, but Rihanna Fenty hadn't lived there in decades. She'd left Barbados as a teenager, disappearing into the machinery of American entertainment and emerging, years later, as something the island had helped create, but could never quite claim ownership of. Now, at 38, she was bringing her children back to the place where she'd learned to survive poverty, watched her father's addiction, and discovered that she possessed a voice people would listen to. Westbury New Road is on the outskirts of Bridgetown, wedged between ocean views and a cemetery. It isn't the kind of street that trends on social media or appears in travel guides. It's where actual people lived, and live lives shaped by ordinary constraints. That a street there should carry her name at all represents a peculiar collision between global celebrity and local geography, between what Robin Fenty became and who she used to be. The visit stretched across several weeks. Rihanna and $AP Rocky, her partner of 6 years, had brought their 3 children to the island during crop over season, the month-long cultural festival that defines Barbadian summers. The oldest boy, RZA, was 4. The middle child, Riot, was 3. The infant, Rocky Irish, was 11 months old, born just last September, so new to the world that this was essentially her first extended time in her mother's birthplace. For someone as closely monitored as Rihanna, the visit revealed patterns in how she's chosen to relate to home. Day parade on August 4th, the grand finale of Crop Over, wearing a turquoise costume layered with gemstones, peacock feathers, and crystals. A creation by Barbadian designer Lauren Austin. She wasn't performing. She was participating. She stood with her brother's band, moving through the streets alongside thousands of locals who'd planned their year around this single day of celebration. The distinction matters. There's a specific kind of tourism that treats home countries as backdrops for Instagram content, opportunities for authentic-looking photos that demonstrate one's connection to roots. Rihanna's approach has been different. She attends because she participates in the culture, not because it enhances her brand. During the crop over season, she was photographed at roadside coconut stands, a gray top pulled over her swimsuit, ordering drinks for her sons and daughter. She watched with what witnesses described as obvious delight as one of her boys worked into the coconut's flesh once the water was gone. It was the kind of small ritual familiar to anyone raised on the island, a specific pleasure coded into childhood, the way a coconut tastes different when you open it yourself on a Tuesday afternoon in August. Anonymity was never realistic, particularly not in a country where she remains a national hero. She'd received that title in November 2021, when Barbados officially transitioned from a monarchy to a republic. Prime Minister Mia Mottley had stood before gathered dignitaries and declared Rihanna the 11th national hero in the nation's history, and the first woman to receive the honor while still living. The ceremony carried the weight of official recognition. Going forward, she could claim the title Right Honorable, a formal designation that would follow her legal name. The nationalism embedded in that gesture isn't subtle. Motley's speech referenced Rihanna's extraordinary commitment to the land of her birth, but the commitment had been selective. Rihanna had returned to Barbados for crop over consistently, for family occasions, for quiet stretches away from the industry. She'd been appointed a cultural ambassador in 2008, tasked with promoting tourism and investment. She'd made significant philanthropic contributions through her Clara Lionel Foundation, but she'd also built her life elsewhere, accumulated wealth that now exceeded that of almost every other female musician on Earth, and created business empires that had nothing to do with Barbados itself. The Fenty brand, launched in partnership with LVMH, generated roughly $1.4 billion of her estimated $1.7 billion net worth. Fenty Beauty had disrupted an entire industry by expanding shade ranges and rejecting the traditional gatekeeping that had defined cosmetics companies for decades. The fashion house brought a different sensibility to luxury: inclusive, bold, willing to take risks on unconventional models and ideas. Forbes had declared her the youngest self-made female billionaire when she crossed that threshold in 2022. The designation, however, glossed over the complexity. She hadn't become a billionaire through independence. She'd partnered with one of the world's largest luxury conglomerates, giving up certain freedoms in exchange for resources and distribution. It was an exchange that worked for her and apparently for LVMH. But wealth and global success had costs that don't appear in financial statements. Just 5 months before returning to Barbados with her children, Rihanna's Beverly Hills home had been targeted by gunfire. A 35-year-old woman named Ivana Lizette Ortiz had driven to their property on March 8, 2026, and fired approximately 10 rounds from inside a Tesla parked across the street. The bullets penetrated the fence, hit the Airstream trailer where Rihanna and $AP Rocky had been sleeping, and struck the main house where their children were sleeping, with their grandmother. Court documents later revealed that Rihanna had screamed, "They're shooting at us," as she woke, then shoved Rocky from their bed onto the floor. The terror in that moment, the calculation required to protect your partner, the knowledge that your children were meters away in a room full of weapons, wasn't something she'd chosen to discuss publicly. When investigators asked about the windshield of the trailer pierced by bullets, she'd pointed to the evidence. When prosecutors needed her testimony, she provided it. But she hadn't given interviews. She hadn't used the incident to build a narrative of victimhood or resilience. She'd simply continued. Her baby girl had been born the previous September. She'd walked the red carpet weeks after giving birth. She'd attended fashion weeks and award shows. The suspect remained unidentified in her motive. Prosecutors would later present evidence to a grand jury, but the fundamental question, why someone had driven across the country to fire into a home where children were sleeping, remained unanswered in public discourse. In some cases, obsession provides clarity. In others, it provides only randomness and inexplicable violence. This appeared to fall into the latter category. 5 months later, Rihanna was standing on Rihanna Drive with her 3 children, posing in front of the house where she'd grown up. The juxtaposition of contexts makes the moment almost surreal. She just lived through a year that included the kind of security breach that changes how you relate to physical space. You stop trusting the idea of home as safe. You understand that wealth and status can't prevent everyone who wants to harm you. And then, potentially as an antidote, you return to the place you grew up, to the street that now carries your name, and you bring your children to see who you were before you became who you are. Her mother was there during the Beverly Hills shooting. She was also in Barbados with the family in August. Presence of her mother across both moments suggests something about how Rihanna has approached the year, not as a disruption to be overcome alone, but as a family circumstance requiring family presence. She'd spoken rarely about her mother in the media, particularly compared to how much she'd discussed her father's decline and addiction during interviews in her 20s. But in actions, the relationship seemed different. The choices she was making to bring her mother to Los Angeles and then to Barbados, to include her in the intimate family spaces, suggested reconciliation or simply the ordinary maturation that happens when adult children stop expecting their parents to be what they were not. The children represented different things. RZA and Riot had been born into security, wealth, and a certain kind of international existence. They'd attended fashion weeks as infants. They'd been photographed by paparazzi before they could form memories. For them, Barbados was a place their mother came from, which was different from a place they were from. They had no memory of Westbury as a neighborhood where people lived ordinary lives. They knew it as a street that carried their mother's name, which was already a strange thing to process at 3 and 4 years old. Rockeye Irish was too young to process geography at all, but photographs and videos would do that work for her later. She'd grow up knowing that in August 2026, when she was 11 months old, her mother had carried her to a street in the Caribbean and stood in front of a house, telling a story about the person she used to be. The timing of the return suggested something deliberate. $AP Rocky had spoken to the press about how the shooting had stolen the peace and happiness of just being free, suggested he wanted to reclaim space from violence and randomness, a return to Barbados, to a place where Rihanna held official status as a national hero, where she could participate in festival culture rather than merely observe it, where the street signs confirmed her significance. It functioned as the opposite of Los Angeles. Yet the visit also raises questions about what returns to origin actually accomplish. Rihanna's journey from Westbury to Beverly Hills to Barbados, again, isn't a circle. It's a line that keeps bending toward different versions of home. She'll never again be the girl who lived on that street, dealing with her father's addiction and her own fears about a future she couldn't quite imagine. That girl is preserved in memory, in the stories she's told in interviews, in the music she made that referenced survival and resilience. But she's also gone, replaced by versions of herself that she's constructed through work, business decisions, relationships, and public presence. The September 2025 arrival of her daughter, announced via Met Gala reveal when Rihanna appeared visibly pregnant in a tailored outfit and wide-brimmed hat, had shifted something. She'd been vocal for years about her desire for children, but it had been academic, a position stated in interviews, but not urgent. With 3 children under 5, the urgency became material. AP Rocky had shared his own processing of fatherhood in recent interviews, discussing how it reordered his priorities and made the past seem less relevant. For Rihanna, motherhood had added another dimension to her relationship with Barbados. She wasn't just returning as the island's most successful global export. She was returning as a mother, wanting to show her children where she came from, how she survived, and what home meant. The Instagram photographs didn't require narrative explanation because the image itself carried the meaning. A mother with her 3 children standing on a street named after her in the Caribbean in the summer, with her caption pointing toward the strangeness and grace of life's trajectories. The comments filled with support and recognition, as they do for nearly everything Rihanna posts.